Let me introduce Andres Angeliani, the Chief Solutions he's in charge of Chief of Solutions at Globant in the U.S. So Andres, thank you.
Hello, everybody. Big party last night? Hope not. So I'm going to talk about Agile and scale. Who thinks that Agile and scale are compatible terms? Raise hands. Agility and scale. Good. We have a few optimists. Generally, they're not, actually. I mean, agility generally gets slower at scale. And we are, in our group, in our company, we've worked for years trying to solve that problem. It's hard to solve, but there's some techniques. What I'm going to show to you today is a collection of experiences rather than philosophy, some pragmatic things that we've done to increase agility at scale and keep that innovation gene intact from the time we were small. We've been developing software for about 12 years in the company that now I run. I'm the Chief Solutions Officer for Globant here in the US. And what we've seen is that when we were small, things we converged towards a goal. The strategic objectives were very aligned. And then we grew big from 0 to 4,000, from being very private and intimate to public and trading publicly. And that since we create software for our clients, we've seen that situation repeating in our clients as well at different stages. I mean, we work with small cap to large cap companies, with startups as well, and we see different patterns of behavior. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. And then, this one doesn't work, but I'm going to. There we go. So the image that I show there, the big elephant there, right? Size and scale, size and innovation generally don't match very well. So what we've seen is that, we talk to a CEO of a startup, a healthy startup. In the first couple of years, you see convergence. And then you go to a large cap company of thousands of people, particularly where their core business maybe is not software development, and you see multiple divisions, and you see a lot of boundaries, and you see that kind of engineering and development becomes sort of a supplier of a bigger organization that's more connected to revenue streams. So it's very difficult to produce innovation there. It's very difficult to work together in that type of environment. That's one flip of things get slower, basically. As we're bigger, things get slower. Just a statement that I wanted to make. Now, on the other side of the coin, we face a challenge now. Multiple platforms, multiple resolutions, screen sizes. The experience becomes complex, but simple to the user. And the user is less tolerant of experiences where technology adds friction. I want to pay with a single method. I want to talk to my phone, and when I am in the car, I don't want to talk to the systems in the car. Why would I? It's a hassle. If I'm running, I just want to wear my watch. The synchronization is seamless. I don't have to worry about that. So I don't have to worry about many, many other things. That's great for the user, great in the experience, but what about us, the developers? It makes our life more complicated. In organizations where they're very large, it makes it even more complicated because there are people that own different things. Somebody owns digital. What is digital? Maybe mobile, right? They call it digital in a traditional organization that's just trying to move their business into that space. Platforms, streaming, digital platforms, commerce platforms, APIs. Are we all ready for the next for converging all these different devices and these different things into one seamless experience for the user? What are the requirements in terms of teams, in terms of environments to get this done. That's, further challenge. And at the same time, we know that things get slower when we grow. So how do we solve for that? Generally what happens is that when traditional organizations, and this happens more, this is not a law, this is something that we've seen and we've experienced in our clients. We run, from 350 to 400 projects at the same time, and we interact with lots of clients, and we see that the more traditional clients, where software development is not their core business, they rush and create organizations around it. They create, we got to have user experience. Because your mobile app sucks, right? So I don't like that experience, so we need to redefine it. Visually, it's not compelling, everything needs to look like Apple. I mean, we got to do it. So they create these organizations that are more, they're attached generally to product, but they forget, or it's almost impossible to connect engineering at the same time. So if you think about the timeline, generally visual design and user experience groups go ahead and create roadmaps in isolation. The roadmaps in isolation create a mountain of assumptions that then, when they go to development, create this kind of sensation or perception of developer. Daunting. What are these guys trying to achieve, right? What we want to achieve, we don't have the platform to do it. The API is not ready. Our systems are dispersed. And these guys are the ones that created the business in the first place, and now they are the bad guys because they can't do it, right? But the phenomenon is that they are working in isolation. That's the problem. So simply, is this thing, let's see, there. So simply the solution is, let's work together. Well, that's easier said than done. The bigger we are, the more difficult it is to work together. So we came up a couple of years ago. We constantly refine the way that we plug into clients, because we are a service company for clients. So as we create software for them and products for them, we thought, okay, so if we cannot figure out how we plug in and we can be a better partner, then we're going to disappear. So out of necessity, this came up. We call it Agile Pods. So what we have seen with this model, and this is not the ultimate solution, things can fail, obviously, but it's a good set of good practices. What we have seen is that pods are teams, obviously, and these teams, they can increase their performance 2 or 3 times. We've seen impact in time to market of 25, 30%, sometimes twofold gain in time to market or speed to market. We have seen also cost reduction, because we can get more product by time unit. Hence, if the team is more expensive, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, it delivers more product, right? So that's, we have seen that in large scale partnerships, 200, 300, 1,000 people partnerships. So how do we do it? So about a couple of years ago, after, as I said, after we kind of done a few of these larger engagements, we decided to generalize this in a kind of a method, from craft going a little bit into science, and say, okay, so what is the method? What is the model? And we went back and tried to explain through biology. The team is a cell. A team, it's a set of people, but it's not a pod if it doesn't have a purpose. And what is the purpose? The purpose of the pod is to evolve. Evolve means maturity. Maturity is measured. It cannot be a symbol. It has to be measured. It's measured in velocity. It's measured in quality. It's measured in innovation. It's measured in self-sufficiency of the pod. These are kind of basic dimensions of maturity within a pod. And then the other aspect is the pod cannot be just assigned incoherent tasks. Sometimes we create teams and we assign them one task that is create a service, and then there comes a disjoint service and things that they have to create. They have to be and live within some sort of cohesion in terms of functionality. They have to either produce full feature, full set of features, full set of products. They have to take a platform, say iOS, Android. They have to develop themselves within that environment. That's kind of the very, very principle. Also, you've seen that the cell has a core, right? The core is the DNA of the pod. What is the core? Within a group of 7 to 8 people, 7 to 10, let's say, more than 10 people, a pod kind of breaks, too big, right? Up to 8 people, we've seen that productivity or velocity keeps increasing, up to obviously physical limit. So what we've seen is that the DNA is those core people that we incentivize to carry the culture, identity of the pod, business domain knowledge, technology stack know-how. That's what we're interested in. Who are those guys? And what is the path to become a pod member? Create a career path within the same team. How do we become? Create a set of things that need to be met. Tenure within the project could be one. Certain technology skills, certain domain skills that are developed from working, from experience. Not that you bring a lot of experience being a specialist in a certain technology, rather certain technology applied to building that particular product or building that particular platform. That's what we're talking about here with being a core member. And then from that cell, we need to be able to multiply that cell, right? So when we multiply that cell, we think about 3 dimensions. One is ecosystem. The ecosystem in this case, going back to biology again, it's a system of living organisms that share resources. But in this case, it's a set of pods. But when we take a closer look at ecosystem, what we're looking for is to trace what are the dependencies between pods? What do they owe to each other? What is the balance of pods? There are pods that are better in innovation, pods that are better in production, pods that are better in quality. Since we measure all that, we can understand what the maturity of the system, what kind of system do we have? What kind of ecosystem do we have? And we can trace it to a roadmap, a product roadmap, very clearly. If we understand who, for example, what is the level of relationship in terms of dependencies, what components they owe to each other, we can put it clearly in a roadmap. If you have a team, say a team of 300 people, and they're all organized in pods, you know exactly, in real time what the critical path is. And we've determined that clearly by just tracing what's the path of, and I'll explain it later with a little bit more of a detail. How do you see where there's a blockage? So instead of just going and redrawing Gantt charts and going, just trying to catch up, you know exactly when things are going to get blocked because you know what the relationship is. When we're small, that's very easy. When we're very big, that's very difficult. And that's where projects stall. So we try to alert almost near real time when things are about to block, instead of just solving blockages all the time. The second dimension is maturity, and we said the pod has a purpose. Okay, so we created levels of maturity. And what is that? Within the levels, we put velocity, quality, innovation, autonomy gates. All that in measurable components. Velocity, easy to measure. It could be points. It could be whatever you think. This is not an agile dissertation. I mean, it could be whatever allows you to size product by time unit. In our case, we use, for example, number of hours per story point as a measure of how much a story point cost. And hence, one of the objectives of the pod is to reduce the number of hours per story point, hence reduce their cost per story point. That means that they're more efficient, right? Without sacrificing quality, which we also measure. So if you create gates for each level, then there is purpose for the pod to evolve, to move forward. And the other part, since the ecosystem traces all the different relationship between pods and maturity traces the pod and how it moves forward towards efficiency, towards perfection, although perfection is not reachable, but it will just move towards perfection, we need a system, and this is something that we learned, because we try to make everything very scientific, very measured and very disciplined and rigorous. You need a fun factor. There has to be some relaxation at the end of the day. So some game mechanics allow us to, first, expose and build a meritocratic merit by merit. You do well, you go move forward. But we need to expose those guys that work hard, that increase the level of maturity, that don't block the project, that don't break the build, where all the reports on quality come okay and they're always green. Those guys need to be exposed. Sometimes those guys are not the most articulate, right? They're not the most marketing driven, but they need to be exposed, and the system has to expose them, and their careers need to be impacted, right? Positively impacted, obviously. For that, we use game mechanics. Then, we talked about the pods. How do we scale from the pods? And some things that we've learned is that the DNA of a team is the most important thing. And the DNA is concentrated in that group of people that we call the core members. Those guys that you really, really trust. I mean, we're not talking, this is not rocket science. Everybody knows within a team who are the strongest players, right? So when we create new teams, instead of creating teams from scratch, all new people, we try to split the cell. We call that mitosis. It's just, we split the cell and we infuse that DNA of a strong team within a new team. So that allows the new team to reduce their learning curves and basically take that culture in and focus and get on the maturity path in a good way, in a healthy way. That's the purpose of mitosis. Sometimes, everybody's busy. It's not a perfect situation. We can't do it. But when we can, when the primary pod has enough core members, then we always try to use one of those or two of those to basically seed a new or spin up a new team. And that's how we grow, right? And then we're going to talk a little bit about organizational views. It's, the pods within the ecosystem and how they are supported. What you see here is a flipped organizational chart. Generally, the organizational chart, is like a triangle. Well, this is a triangle, but, the base is at the top. There is because the doers are the most important thing in our system. Without them, we have nothing, right? So things are not mandated. We are counting on team self-regulation. What is this? Because the team has a purpose, because the pod has a purpose, why would we have to, from the management side, mandate and pressure teams? That's not, if you have a goal and it's been accepted by the teams and the leader is strong and we have good core membership, if there is a member that's not working out and is dragging the pod velocity, for example, or is making quality suffer, then the pod itself has to react, and the pod does react. We've seen that when there is a pod that's trying to move from one level of maturity to another level of maturity where they get better pay and they get bonuses and perks, etc., because obviously the level of maturity is associated to some financial compensation or some perk. Could be financial or non-financial, but there has to be something there. There has to be a very clear carrot, okay? So in our case, with our clients, we do it with a rate. Higher the rate, the higher the level of maturity, the higher the rate. If you're do it within your own company, it could be higher pay or different things that they can do, right? Very clear, delineated. Training that they can receive, etc. I mean, you can get as creative as you want. So here, what we're trying to say is the middle layer there, which is technical architects, product managers, organized in groups or portfolios or projects, support the podified ecosystem They support it with standards, they support it with coordination, synchronization, in terms of visualizing where are the dependencies in the ecosystem, how do we resolve the dependencies, how do we standardize the technology architecture, how do we share information and build a system of collaboration among teams. That's the purpose of the middle layer. And obviously, the top layer, which is at the bottom in this case, those are the guys that basically hold the budget. They support with resources, right? But what we look at is that top, and the top is the system of pods over there. This is something that we did. This is actually our structure, because we had to build a company where the people convert into pods. So instead of building a company of silos, we built a circular organization. In this case, we call them studios, and this is an idea. These are different, the studios are basically, there are groups where we implement cohesive practices. We have a mobile, digital content, etc. I mean, this is not the purpose of the chat. It's just to give you an idea of how you can model an organization. These are basically technology or talent skills. Talent is built. It's like you're planting something, right? Corn. You need certain type of soil. You need certain temperature. In this case, talent has to grow together to be pure. But then talent works with other people. So they converge in a point, and they converge at the pod level. So product management, engineering, UX, design and engineering, they work together at the end of the day. They have to work together. They can belong, like here in the last slide, these guys, they can belong, the pod members can be reporting to different people. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that the goal of the pod is the same for everybody that is part of the pod. That's the important thing. And what's important is that at the middle and upper layer, the middle layer, there is support from the management that is the goal. So that way, for that particular purpose, for this particular roadmap, it works because we're all working towards the same objectives, right? Otherwise, if we have UX reporting to a guy, development reporting to another guy, QA reporting to another guy, product reporting to another guy, and they all have different goals, obviously the project is going to stall because their times are consumed by different things that they have to do on a day-to-day basis. If there is an understanding on the goals in terms of velocity, in terms of feature set, then there's clear, regardless of departmental boundaries, of what they have to do, and they work together. They can work together full-time, they could work together part-time, it doesn't matter. But the purpose is the same, and they're compensated for that purpose. That's key. If we break that principle, then things start to go in different ways that we don't want to. Now, let's talk about the maturity path. This is a little bit more about the metrics that we generally collect. There is a multiplicity of things that we can measure. In velocity, as I said, we generally measure hours per point because we want to have a measure of how much a team takes or how much it costs per unit or product. It's very important there that you get a good understanding of how they estimate, because people can game the system and they can say that things are much more, require much more effort than they really are. But if a team does that in comparison, you can basically capture who are the teams that are kind of gaming the system in a couple of 3 sprints, because at the end of the day, they're going to deliver less, and there are teams that are going to deliver more. So you make a comparison there, and it's just not, it's short-lived, basically. Quality, there are short, like very quick ways to measure. We use green builds overall, on top of overall builds, for example, total builds. It's a percentage. Kind of gives you a good idea. If you build a lot, if in a continuous build environment, which obviously we promote for these kinds of programs, you get a lot of builds. And if you have a good test coverage, when you build and it's green, means that you're doing something right. Maybe the product, it doesn't give you an overall level of quality, but it gives you an indication. And that's what we're all about. You can measure defects. The defects that obviously are way more are the ones that are towards the end of the product lifecycle or the production lifecycle, more towards a bug in pre-production is much heavier than a bug in production, et cetera, et cetera. We measure efficiency as well, how many bugs the team detects versus how many bugs the external QA team detects, if there is an external QA. In many cases, for compliance, we cannot eliminate external QA. We try to use embedded QA within the team, so QA within the same team, the same pod, and a QA team that works for that pod ecosystem. That's the best because it doesn't block any progress, but sometimes for regulation and compliance, there is a third-party QA that where our product has to go. But in that case, we measure that kind of testing efficiency. We also measure whatever tools provide us, and we try not to reinvent any wheel. We try to work on standard tools, right? We integrate with Zen Server, we integrate with other tools, Jenkins for building, Jira, Rally, whatever tool is out there, just don't reinvent things. This is a kind of a collection of metrics that we put together, and then we analyze from that, and we try to collect and get a dashboard that gives us information almost real time of what's going on. And then from the maturity path, we place pods within a level. We measure we generally measure quarterly, or depends on how long your project is. You can measure monthly or quarterly. You collect metrics all the time, and you're looking at the dashboard all the time, but you promote or demote pods in maturity monthly or quarterly. You cannot do it every day because it's too much overhead. I mean, at least for us, it was just too much overhead. So basically what we do is we meet with the pods, we analyze the different parameters, velocity, quality, innovation, autonomy for that pod on a monthly basis, and we say, okay, this month you performed level 2, you fell within all these, you're within these gates, these metrics. So the level 2, you're gonna enjoy level 2 benefits for the next month. If you perform level 3, then the following month you're gonna enjoy level 3 benefits. If you perform level 1, then you're gonna go back. That's the way we do it. So you keep it up all the time. And then the other very, very important thing is game mechanics. We want the pod to have an identity. We want that they define themselves. We want that they create a neural network or cell network, and they strengthen that for collaboration. So they have to have an identity. Generally, we use avatars. So they're very, very simple mechanics, but in a large-scale system, they work really, really well. So people get creative, right? Some of them just, they name themselves after regionalisms, like, we have teams in Argentina, they name the tango or gaucho or things that, are very typical from there. There are other teams that want to depict some personality, etc. And generally the personality is related to how well they are or they perform at one particular leaderboard. So for example, the leaderboards could be different dimensions that you actually track. Velocity, who is the most productive versus the most creative. Those guys that come up with prototypes all the time, and you evaluate and you weigh prototypes so they come up in the leaderboard. So you have pods that are more innovation oriented. You have pods that are more production oriented. Others that are more quality oriented. They're more precise in their quality. They're a bit slower but very good, and there are no bugs. So when you start comparing that and you see, I have 3 that are really high in innovation, I have 20 that are really high in production, and I have 10 that are really high in quality, then you start understanding what is the balance in that ecosystem that you have. And that helps you determine and predict whether these guys are going to do it or not. And we're talking about big kind of transformation programs here, but you can apply it in the small as well, right? If you start small with this system, then when you grow big, it just scales naturally. The maturity level promotions are kind of celebrations that we do when you're level 1 and then you get to level 2. There's a little party there. We try not to do it every time, but once a couple months, it's fun. So your celebration goes with that. Then we've used a point system to become a core member, things that you have to do to become a pod core member. Could be training other people, increasing the velocity of your pod. It could be understanding more about, in our case, the client business, delivering a prototype to the client. All that increases points. And then when you're 100%, you're considered to be a core member and you're compensated differently. Very, very based on metrics. And then the peer-to-peer rewards are, ways of collaborating. For example, there is a pod that is performing at high velocity, but depends on a second pod that's dragging their velocity down. And there is a relationship there, and they know that these guys are going to be late, and then they're going to stall. So how do we solve for that problem? I mean, it's unfair for the pod that has high velocity to be dragged, very unfair. So generally what we try to do is we swap, right? Why don't you, maybe a guy is in San Francisco, a pod is in San Francisco, another pod we have in Bogota, in Colombia. So how do we do it? We fly a guy over and we flip. Say, okay, so you come from Francisco and you from the other pod come to Colombia. And work it out. Try to work it out. Try to both increase both your velocities. And then we compensate them when they make it, right? So we kind of incentivize them to try and think out of the box, right? Just not stay in their little cocoon, but think outside the picture, understand who you are really, if you're dragging somebody, who they are, and what they may need, and then compensate for that forward thinking. These are kind of three examples of large deals, and some of these clients we share with Zend. They're kind of the first deals that kind of position this model as a general model for us. The first one is we made video games, AAA video games. The second one, we created a mobile platform. And the third one, we created a whole experience for parks, digital experience for parks, which was really, really interesting. I cannot say a lot of information because it's client privileged information, so there's no way I can disclose. But these are kind of three foundational clients where we were very successful with model. And then, obviously, what is the tool set, right? I'm just going to show you a little bit, just a glimpse of what the tool set is for visualization. We want to visualize this almost near real time. So what we can create, now what we're doing is we're creating a product out of this because we feel that everybody needs this at one point. Instead of just having a lot of detailed information, we want to have an idea of, what is the relationship between pods, right? This is all fake data, and the names are a little bit ridiculous because we basically we couldn't use any client pod name for any reason. But so Lollipop and Candy, they're all pod names, and Chocolate, and they have inconsistent avatars, but it doesn't matter. The relationship is clearly set there. What we're trying to say is, as you can see, ice cream must provide Facebook friends data component today, right? It should say today, but it says 0 days. And Marshmallow must provide user age in REST API, and it's -3 days, 3 days delayed, right? That, if you look at it and you have 2, maybe not very important. When you have 20, that's really, really cool to have something like that. Then this is an example of leaderboards. In this case, we measure autonomy. Autonomy, generally, we measure it. We do a correlation of, what's the weight of core members within a pod. So if you have 10% of core members within a pod, then perhaps your autonomy is directly correlated to autonomy. The more core membership you have, the more autonomy you have in a team. We call it self-regulation, whatever, but in this case, velocity, for example, they are ordered by number of points done. And in this case, the points are comparable. In most cases, you can't compare velocity profiles across pods because they have different dependencies or they have different complexities. So what we do is a relative comparison. For example, how many within the last sprint you have increased 25% your velocity. So that's what we measure, right? As a function of what is your velocity profile versus, an absolute value like there in terms of points done versus the rest. Maybe the point is not the same thing. That's what I'm trying to say. Then we want to have a product view that gives us the pods that are participating in that product, how well or badly they're doing towards that product, and then the overall features, how we're doing in terms of features, right? Messaging, connections, explore and discover are there. How many points are done versus how many points are remaining, and what is, in terms of number of days, what is, are we on target or not? Very, very easy, clear, without having to go and dig into tools of what the progress level is. And then when we go to, these are more comparisons of what real-time feature progress. And then the pod view is interesting because it gives us an idea of what level the pod is in each dimension, productivity, autonomy, quality, and it gives us also an idea of what kind of pod it is. What pod skills, these are better, these guys that work cloud there gives an idea that this pod is better in UX and Java, but they have other skills. And then they have some domain expertise because they've done vouchers and orders features in the past. So we cannot track throughout the life of the pod while it's formed and it morphs what they've done in the past. Because we know that if next project or next feature set, then we have a better idea of who is the best pod for which task or for which functionality set. This is a demonstration of maturity. I'm not going to go deeply in there. It's a lot of data there, but this is generally how we measure and we place pods at different levels. That's, in this case, it's a very fast, very good pod. It's level 3 pod. It is a different way of, for the pod itself, what kind of features they are doing, in what kind of stories they are performing, and the green ones are done, the yellows are working on, and the others. Very quick and easy way for somebody that's probably a VP of engineering or VP of product to understand quickly what's going on with that particular program. And then lastly, one of the things that we try to measure, which is very important, is just mapping to financial results, is how much the pod is costing us over time. As we know that they have a purpose, which is increased efficiency, the increase in cost has to be less than the increase in efficiency. So that's what we track in there. It's like, what is the cost per point, right? If we can normalize the points that they do across, along their history, then there is obviously an opportunity to understand financially what that pod means to the ecosystem, right? And it's just a wrapping up, and I have 7 minutes. So basically, when we talk about pods, we talk about what does it mean, right? Podify is a new verb that we invented, which is basically create these teams that have purpose, they have an incentive to evolve, and they are within an ecosystem. And then, the ecosystem is important at scale, where we map and trace all these different relationships near real time. There is a fun factor. It's very, very important in these systems where you recognize the merits and you understand what is the contribution of every team. There is a matter of self-regulation as well within the pods. They have to be empowered to select their people. They have to be empowered to eject their people, to train their people. They have to be empowered to grow and become core members, become team leads of their pod. So there is a built-in career path within that, and that then can transport that individual into another level. Obviously, the impacts from a business point of view is efficiency and time to market. That's what we're looking for, right, as a result of this model. And we've seen tremendous results when the teams really share that common goal. And overall, we think that at scale, if we work like this, trying to fade, not distract, not break boundaries that are already set. We understand that when an organization grows, it evidently has to create divisions and departments and boundaries. It's just the nature of things, and turfs will happen no matter how much we want to, and we say that we don't like them. So we, instead of just going and trying to shake the structure, we build a structure that's orthogonal to that, and that aligns by goal and gets people to actually, simply work together. So that's the whole of my presentation, and thank you very much for the time, and thank you.